There's so many ways that we don't have autonomy, being able to make decisions about our bodies and our lives and our futures and our partners and our families and friends, where we live and how we live, and just being able to make informed decisions about all that, not just trying to survive this world, which I think a lot of us are right now, because what it means to have freedom and to share freedom means kind of giving up power, because that's what people think, is that they're going to lose their power.
Hi there. Welcome to the Empowered and Embodied Show. I'm Kim Romaine.
And I'm Louise Neal. We're two transformational coaches who are also fellow travelers on the path of growth and self-discovery. And we're inviting you along for the ride.
That's right. We're right here in the trenches with you, navigating the ups and downs of life. And each week we'll be sharing our own experiences, bringing you conversations with amazing guests, and exploring insights and strategies that have helped us find more clarity, confidence, and ease in our lives.
And trust us, we do not have it all figured out. We're learning and growing right alongside you.
So if you're ready to rise above the chaos, doubt, and confusion that sometimes life throws our way,
and step into a more empowered and embodied version of yourself,
then you're in the right place. Let's get started. Well, hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Empowered and Embodied Show. I am one of your co-hosts, Kim Romaine, joined as always by the lovely and amazing.
I'm Louise, and I'm so happy to be here today. And I'm very excited to have this conversation with our guest.
I am Rebecca Justus, and I am so excited to be here with you. Thanks for having me.
We're so glad that you're here. I'm going to let the world know a little bit about you, and then we're going to dive into the meaty juiciness of our conversation. And if you're vegetarian, I apologize for that.
I am not. We're good.
Okay, good. So Rebecca is an ethical leadership advisor and coach, supporting socially responsible rising leaders and teams to become more strategic and self-aware, stay true to their values, and lead with integrity both locally and globally. She is also the creator of Reproductive Autonomy, an online information hub for trustworthy reproductive resources. Rebecca is a certified anti-racism training facilitator and a vice president of the board of directors for Eco Women. She holds an MA in human rights from the University of Sussex and a BA in international relations from Boston University. Go Boston. Originally from the US, Rebecca has lived in 12 countries and traveled to over 60. I know for Louise, your heart just exploded because that is your happy place to think about being in that many places. I mean, mine too, but really Louise's.
It is 60 countries. Favorite.
Do you remember them all?
Yeah.
Yes. I couldn't necessarily list them all right now, but if I looked at a map, I could tell you all of them. I can do the ones I lived in, and I have to do that in order because otherwise I forget them. So yeah.
Sure.
Favorite country? Where would you go back to?
Ooh, I don't have a favorite because they were all, different times in my life and just amazing places. And there's so many I would go back to and so many more I want to go to. It's very funny because my friends say, the thing about Rebecca is that she just wants to basically go anywhere that's not an active war zone. That's correct. Yep.
Well, that's getting fewer and far between.
Yeah, we're getting
few and far between.
Yeah, options are
a little hard now. Little hard. So how did you end up doing all the things that you're doing?
Oh, sure. Easy question.
Starting easy.
Yeah, well, I knew since I was little that I wanted to travel internationally. And so once I started, when I was in high school and starting college and all this, I was sort of starting to think, how do I actually do that in life? How do I make that part of my life? And I realized you could do a degree in international relations and you could actually start to travel and make that part of the way that you live. So so that's what I did was I got that degree and then I moved to Washington, D.C., which is where everybody I knew got their start kind of moving and traveling. And so I started working in international development for different organizations around the world, kind of doing a range of work for them. I won't get into all that because there's so much, but just human rights, women's rights, LGBTQ, gender, all of these kind of healthcare, reproductive. That's how I got into the reproductive space. And I just really loved that work. And, at some point I kind of struggled with how that work was being done and just the kind of neo-colonial and imperialistic aspects of it. Basically, these foreigners coming into these countries and saying, we know how to solve these problems, and not actually getting to know them in depth and listening to the locals on how the problem should be solved. And so I thought, how can I actually do this work that I'm passionate about and I care about in a way that aligns with my values and makes sense to me? So I started doing my own work and started my passion project, Reproductive Autonomy, and began coaching and consulting and doing all these other things in ways that felt good to me. And so, yeah.
Yeah, being able to know what's a misalignment and to know what's an alignment, right? When you're feeling those crunchy things and things aren't landing, how to pivot or how to craft your next step so that it is in alignment. You and I connected because I came across your work, Reproductive Autonomy, and I was just it it just hit me kind of right here because of how needed it is in a space that just is shrinking for many, many women around resources, trusted resources. And it just was like, thank goodness that there is a place to go to get that information so that we all can feel way more in control of our own choices because we are armed with good information. Tell me about the birth of that
Yeah.
reproductive autonomy.
I know passion project is kind of the way to describe it, but it just means so much more to me. It's just a natural line of something that I love that has emerged over time. So as I said before, I kind of have worked in the reproductive space probably 5 or so years throughout my career intermittently. But it has always just been a thread of something that I've just loved and followed and stayed connected to. So I was in a program and they wanted us to kind of create a project of something we cared about. And I thought, I've been collecting these resources. I'm one of these people who naturally just collects things, resources and networks and all of these things, right? And so I had this massive kind of list of all of these organizations and information sheets and just anything you could think of reproductive related. And I thought, what if I could actually make that into something that was useful for more people instead of me sending a spreadsheet to my friends who request it or requesting certain resources and me sending those to them? And so I thought, what if I did for my project, had someone help me to kind of create this website? And so I worked with someone else and that's what we did. Then it sort of evolved into what it is now. I was able to sort of separate it out into the areas that made more sense to me. So it's now divided into get help, get informed, and get involved so that people can find resources based on those areas. But that's kind of just what happened. That was kind of how it came to be. And now I'm still adding more resources. I'm trying to see, I would love for it to become a nonprofit at some point. That's obviously a lot of time and effort. So I don't know if I have the capacity for that right now, but that's kind of where it is now. So I'm just trying to raise awareness of the site and just so that people know that they can turn to it. Because I know Google exists, but like you said, a place for trusted resources that someone has looked at and can say isn't a CPC, a crisis pregnancy center or crisis prevention center, which is a fake clinic basically out there. And so just a place where people can go and say, okay, someone has actually checked this and knows that it's legit and I can trust their information. Yeah.
So it's interesting hearing how you went into communities and were hearing like, well, we're not actually listening, right?
Yeah.
Colonialism.
Yeah.
Going in, we can solve your problems, we can fix everything, and yay, we're here. When that's not actually what's needed.
Mhm.
So you're talking about autonomy, right? There. And you're talking about autonomy in terms of reproductive, not just reproductive rights, but
Mhm.
reproductive processes, reproductive understanding. And that through line of autonomy, I'm curious because I know for me, autonomy is huge for me too. I use the
Mhm.
term sovereignty a lot, right? Personal agency, sovereignty, autonomy. How do we have our own voice and how do we know what our voice sounds like?
Hmm.
Why
I
is
love this
autonomy so
question.
important to you?
I think that, as we've kind of said already, there's so much in the world that is trying to sort of strip us of our autonomy, trying to control us in various ways. There's so many ways that we don't have autonomy. And so I realized a while ago that something core to my being was seeking freedom for myself and for others. And I think autonomy is a key piece of that, being able to kind of decide, be able to make decisions about our bodies and our lives and our futures and our partners and our families and friends, all these things, sort of where we live and how we live, and just being able to make informed decisions about all that, not just trying to survive this world, which I think a lot of us are right now because that's just the situation. We're trying to survive what's going on. We're trying to just survive the current situation. But that's yeah, I think just the aspect of freedom and kind of choice and all of that has been key to me for my entire life. So,
But I want to go deeper because, yeah, I agree. I mean, I think we all want freedom, but why are we craving freedom so much? I mean, Louise, jump in too if you want. It's because I like this idea that, yes, we live in oppressive systems that are becoming more authoritarian and more oppressive by the minute. And freedom, autonomy, liberation. These are not new terms. And I'm so curious about just what both of you think. Because again, I have my own thoughts, but I talk to myself all the time. I'm excited to talk to two other people about it. Why is it so important for us? Why is this such a craving? Because even those that are participating in these oppressive systems are claiming to be doing that because they want to be liberated from something. Like everybody wants to be liberated from something, I feel like. Yeah. So I want to dig in.
I think there's a difference between the systems that we're in, right? Like these external forces that are pushing this on us and this sense of like self-liberation that comes from inside. Like those are two different things. And I believe that we can be self-liberated, right? Come back to ourselves, be in control of our thoughts, our feelings, the words that we choose to use, the spaces we choose to show up in. That regardless, I think, of these external pressures. Like, yeah, they influence one another for sure, but we don't have to not be self-liberated because the world
so
is a
true.
shitty place right now.
Amen.
Right?
Yeah.
Something
Yeah.
else, I just really liked what you said, Kim, about that even people who are participating in the oppressive aspects of society are doing it with the intention of becoming more liberated, right? So I love this idea that, I don't know, this is something I think about in my work as sort of ethics, is that it's all such a gray area and it's all fluid and disputable and discussable. And just what does freedom mean to someone versus someone else? I think that's kind of an important piece of the conversation, is what is our baseline definition of freedom? And yeah, I was just thinking about that that's not an answer to your question, but that's just something that came up when you were talking.
That's cool. Well, yeah, because I mean, it's true is if we don't have a unified vision, a unified understanding of what freedom is, then we're going to continue to, with human nature, continue to argue, fight, dissent over, I need my freedom, but then, then you can't have yours because if I have mine, then you can't, right? This back and forth thing. Because I think there is an inherent, and it goes back to what Louise just said, is there's an inherent misunderstanding from my purview of that we can actually all have personal agency, autonomy, personal freedom, personal liberation. And when we own that, because it comes with a lot of responsibility to be that way, to make our own decisions and make our own choices. But when we live that way, that is the pathway to collective liberation. I'm not saying it's the only answer towards it, but I think if we could collectively agree that each of us individually can have our own freedom and operate societally, that would go a long way towards this place that we want to be, which is not being oppressed by others, not being controlled by others. Because I can't imagine anybody's like, yeah, I want to do that. I understand people who want to grasp for control. Psychologically, I understand that need. And
Yeah, I think that's
yeah,
such an
I'm going to pause
interesting
there because I could go on
topic
forever.
because there's also within that is sort of this discussion of power because what it means to have freedom and to share freedom means kind of giving up power, right? Because we often well, that's what people think at the top, right? Is that they're going to lose their power.
Or
And
is
they
it?
think that it seems like
Or
there's an
is it?
idea that there's sort of a limited amount of
Yeah.
freedom or power or something. And if I give up my slice, then I will only have this much when in reality it's unlimited, right? Unlimited freedom, unlimited power, but we're not willing to share it because we're afraid, especially, white people at the top are nervous about what it means if they let someone else take the lead or if they, give anything, give any ground that they've gained. What does that look like? What does that mean? That's scary, right? So, and will they still have the freedom to kind of act and behave in the ways that they have if they're no longer at that level, right? That's sort of a different piece of that conversation, but very interesting.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Which I think absolutely feeds into, right, reproductive and any other type of autonomy, right? How do you see this playing out outside of North America? Like in
See
the other places of the world that
which part,
you've been in,
the
how
power
do you
struggle.
see this playing out?
Well, unfortunately, as we know, the US is a
That
leader
power struggle.
and other
Let's
countries
start there.
follow suit. So we're obviously already seeing the effects of other countries that have been following suit or have started to follow suit in this authoritarian kind of trajectory. But so I'm going to not focus, we know that that's happening. So I'm not going to focus on that because what I do want to focus on is sort of other places where I've lived where power looks different because hierarchies are different. And so what freedom means is different, right? So I've lived in West and East Africa and the countries where I lived, there's obviously hierarchies of sort of gender and ethnicity and religion and all of these different things come into play. But, the ideas of kind of community and collaboration and the value of time are very different than Western kind of American, Canadian, whatever ideas of these. So I think we can learn a lot if we were willing to learn from them. We could learn a lot from how they are running their societies and communities and everything in a different. I'm not going to say they're not they're perfect. They're nothing is perfect, but if we could do, I think, this cross-cultural learning, both learning from both directions, not a top-down, if we're going to say that approach.
Yeah, it's this idea of being open to different points of view. That's I think that's part of autonomy as well. Is that and claiming that if I'm open and I can see all of the things, I still am in choice, right? To be able to go that way or take that next step. I think what's happening is that our view is getting narrower and narrower and narrower. And then we start to not feel like we have a choice because we only feel like we have one path. And I feel like that's what's happening or is trying to happen. And if we can continually step back and say, no, 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 it's not this path, right? It's not just this view, but there's all of these other views too. There's all of these other ways of working, of being, of breathing, of living, of caring, of community. There's all of these things. I'm still in choice of what I bring into my life or what I want to bring into my life. But if we don't have that buffet, if we
Absolutely.
don't have
Love that you said that. I think that that's
that
so
point of view or those
important. And
perspectives, we're
I mean, there's
really
two
losing out.
things that came to mind. I was thinking, travel is one of the best ways, in my opinion, for people to kind of broaden their perspective and be made aware of other options and choices of being and living and just the way that you can see others because we often, have our own little view of the world and we're thinking, well, this is the way that life is done. This is the way that we're all doing it. And then you step out and realize, actually, no, that's not true. There's so many other ways, right? So that was one piece. And then the other piece I was thinking was just obviously in this technology driven world that we're living in, where everything, all of the social media algorithms and all this are just feeding us exactly what we want. It's narrowing it even further. Instead of us trying to widen it, as you said, we're coming to this point where we're just in these echo chambers, right? Everything is just narrowed to exactly what do you like? What do you want to hear? It's not feeding you anything new, anything contradictory to what you already believe. So instead of us we have access now to the entire world at our fingertips, and we're only seeing exactly what we already believe. So
Yeah, that fascinates me, right? When I first started with the internet and moving into social media and saying, now I can experience the world beyond what I see, it so quickly got to be, and I mean, the way it is now, it was already in my world, what is spoon-fed to me, not what I go look
mhm.
for, but what is spoon-fed to me is very North American Eurocentric focused. And the Eurocentric has reduced even over the years. So it's just this North American pot. And I have to intentionally go outside of that to say, no, I actually want to. I do a lot of work in working with cosmic shifts and all of that in the seasons. And so I talk a lot about what's happening in the Northern Hemisphere. And so I was curious, I was like, but what is it like in the Southern Hemisphere, and how are things? Because I did a whole piece on the calendar and the Gregorian calendar that we've all agreed to use. And I just kept saying, but wait a minute, why
Mhm.
is there not more information on Southern Hemisphere and the ways
Mhm.
in which time is tracked in the because it is much harder to find that information than anything that has to do with something that's Eurocentric. And it just, we're losing out. We're losing out
Yes.
on this opportunity
I
to
have lived
understand
along the
what
equator
humanity
several
actually
times,
has
and I've
to
only lived
give each other.
on the southern hemisphere a couple of times. I lived in Australia for a year, um, 2024, and then New Zealand for a few months after that. And I was just amazed. Australia, which it is and feels very separate from the rest of the world, right? But just how Eurocentric it still was there. And I know, the history of colonization there, obviously it makes sense. But still, I
Oh,
mean,
mhm.
just like you said, if you're trying to look at anything specific to that region, I had to dig through all the layers of the Eurocentric North American, all of this other stuff to get to the things about the place where I was. And I thought that that was so bizarre. And they said, I talked to friends living there, and I said, sort of explained what I was seeing and experiencing. And they said, oh, yeah, that's just sort of how it is. Even if you're looking for entertainment options or other things, it's all still coming from those same places, even though we're on this big island way out here. Just sort of blew my mind.
And that we have our own culture and our own government and our own way of being and our own societal norms. It's still being driven by these outside forces,
Yeah, exactly. How do
which
you have
then
autonomy when you're so
affects our own,
connected, or how
right?
do
It
you
affects
learn
our
what your own
cultural
autonomy might
autonomy, but
be
it
when
also
you're so
affects our
connected to
individual
other
autonomy.
things that aren't even the same as you or similar as you? Or, I mean, obviously the connection between Australia and the UK is strong because of that British colonial ongoing relationship, right? But two very different places. So it's so interesting to, think about what would Australian autonomy look like, especially if we're considering the Aboriginal people there. They would have a very different opinion of what autonomy would look like there. And, very interesting.
Yeah. You said it, Rebecca. It comes right now with intentionality. Right? Like this kind of stuff isn't just going to happen, right? All kinds of systems are feeding us that narrow view. They're feeding, right, from the social media to the things we watch on Netflix to, right, everything is funneled to us. And to take a stand and say, no, I want to learn more. I want to discover more. I want to experience more. It's
Oh, I'm
with
so glad you said
intentionality that
that.
we
That's
have to
such a
do
good
that.
point, is that
And that's
intentionality. Because
autonomy,
sometimes
right? Like those two words are
we think that these things
connected.
might just
We
happen
don't
to
have one
us,
without the
or
other.
maybe we already have them or something. Those of us with privilege, right? Especially. But then really, like you said, you can't have autonomy without intentionality. You can't have these things without making choices about, all of this. And have spoken to people who have said, oh, well, I don't really have a choice in this, or I'm not able to do this because of X, Y, and Z. Say, you're always making choices right now. You're making a choice to not do this or to not pursue this or to not think about this in another way or to not, and it's not to blame people, but it's just to say that even if you think you're not making choices or you're not being intentional, you are doing that all the time. We all are. Our actions are speaking to what we have decided, right? So I think that, like you said, the intentionality there is so important for us to, especially in this world where everything is being curated directly for us, like you said, Netflix, Spotify, all of these things. To intentionally make other choices is harder. It's the more annoying, kind of tedious choice, but that's what we have to do. I use Spotify as an example because I know Spotify is bad and I shouldn't be using it, but it's something I have been using and I'm looking at other platforms. But I've gotten really annoyed with it because it just offers you all these playlists of music you already like. And so I started going to playlists created by non Spotify, created by actual users so that I can find other music because I don't want everything being recycled all the time and just the same exact, type of music all the time. And yeah, but that intentionality, I have to make that choice and be actually specific in what I'm looking at and what I'm looking for.
And the systems are making it harder, right? Because the systems in many ways make it easier. Like Spotify. So a very dear friend of mine just released or is in the process of releasing a new book of hers. And she's only releasing it on Amazon. Well, I don't shop on Amazon anymore. And I'm like, I absolutely want to support you. Is there any other way I can get my hands on this book? No, there's not. And so the intentionality is, do I support my friend who's a writer and go? I mean, obviously, I can still buy something from Amazon. I don't pay for any of their services anymore. It's the same thing with Spotify. I still have Spotify because sometimes that's the only place I can find the one thing that I'm looking for. And so, but again, they don't have my money. It's how do we create those?
Mhm.
How do we break free from the systems? Again, those oppressive systems, because if we think about that over curation, that in itself has an oppressive nature, right? It's keeping us, quote unquote, in line. It's keeping us in this little narrow path of this is what you're meant to know and see and be a part of, versus this massive breadth of
Mhm.
amazing culture and sound and music and experience and wisdom that is in the world that goes beyond what anything can be curated for us. And it's hard because, again, the systems, right? These systems that make it so easy to push a button and get my friend's new book. And yet, with intentionality, I have to sit here and decide morally, am I okay with a portion of that money going to Amazon and that who I absolutely do not support? And then if I want to put it out into the world to say, this is a wonderful book, go buy it. Now I'm telling other people to go buy it on Amazon, which is just so hard. And I really want to support my friend. So I haven't decided what I'm going to do. Like I'm just processing it real time, but right. That's an example of how
Yeah. I want to come back
we
to
aren't making
this
autonomous
idea of
decisions
sort
because
of
most people are like, of course I'll support you. Boom, I bought the book.
Sure. I'm thinking about,
Right?
how do we have autonomy in a world in which we're constantly being sort of pushed into these boxes of, for all of these companies that they want to put us in this little space that they can fit into, your age, you are this sex, you are this whatever, so that they can target you with all of their ads and their everything, right? How do we have autonomy in that type of space that is constantly trying to push us into this tiny little box and then keep us in there, right? Because you can't change. Once you've gotten in there, they've locked you in and they've decided this is what you like. And this is, who you are as a person. And you are like all these other people exactly the same as you, right? How do we have autonomy in that kind of situation? How do we push back on that idea, on that kind of cage that we're sort of being pushed into? I don't, just posing this question too. Yeah, right? Exactly.
Yeah. And of course, what came to mind is, do you want the red pill or the blue pill? How much are we getting plugged in, and which pill are you going to take? Because that's your autonomy. Which pill do you take? And that's your only choice.
Yeah. But we have to recognize first that we're in that box.
Yeah. Well, right. Neo had to know he was in the matrix. Before he couldn't do anything else.
Right. I was going to say we have to. I'm going to should on people right now.
Please. This is a big ass should.
And it is about, right? When it's about curiosity, it's about when we are presented with the red or the blue, or when we're presented with like that thing that we're supposed to fall in love with. It's like, can we get deeply curious, self-curious about like, is that the only thing on the menu? Or like, do I really want that? Or what else? Even just asking that question of like, what else is there out there that can feed me just blows it all up, right? It's the asking of that question so that we can remove that veil. And then we get to say, well, no, don't put baby in a corner, right? Like you can't put me in a box
because that's one of my favorite activities is asking questions.
But if we don't know we're there,
people sometimes find it annoying, but it really helps just.
Well, we haven't known.
To kind of
I'm sorry.
Help people push that box open a little bit. Think about, so you did that thing, or you thought about that. Why? Or just, simple things that help people to think, is there another way? Is there another option? Is there something else that I haven't, even if we get set in this kind of routine and we're just on autopilot, which in this survival mode, that's often what we're doing, right? Asking these questions, I think, can help us to realize, like we're talking about, how do we know we're in the box, right? Helping us realize we're in the box, or maybe how constricting the box actually is, and trying to just widen it a bit. Yeah, asking those questions, I think, can be really important.
Yeah, inquiry is absolutely key to removing complacency and complicity. If we don't ask the questions, we do become complacent, and we do become complicit because we're just going along. And that, for many of us, right, this is the whole, like, everything around the concept of being quote unquote woke, if we use that terminology, is to be woke means you're asking questions. I mean, to me, that's the bottom line. I have
that I thought was
woken
very
up.
funny.
I am awakening to this
Someone
concept
talking
that
about wokeness, and so the backlash
this
to
maybe
this.
isn't.
And they said, well, if woke
the
is
only
literally being awake,
answer.
So are people saying that they would rather be asleep? Because that's the other option. And I thought that was a very funny, simple way to think about it, because people are mad about woke, but woke is, like you said, questioning things and just kind of being awake, like this person said.
Right. Yeah, well, and I saw one that was similar to that, which was, if I'm the opposite of woke, I'm in a coma, and I don't personally want to spend my life in a coma. Right. And it's true, because, I mean, asking the questions means that you're alive. Autonomy, stepping into that place of making the choice, being intentional and making the choice. Do I want the red pill? Do I want the blue pill? If that's the only choice I have, having that space of autonomy means that you're living your life, not somebody else's framework, blueprint, box.
Yeah, the answer is rarely out there. Right? The answer is in here, but we have to be asking the questions.
I think there can be really good data out there. Look, me with the data. Usually it's Louise that brings up data. The data's out there because, just right as Rebecca was saying, going to East and West Africa and seeing how different those communities are. So there's data out there. There's data that then gives us the ability to even know what questions to ask. It's why I love playing with cosmic stuff, not because I don't do predictive astrology or readings or things like that. But what I do is I look to them to say, what questions do we need to be asking right now?
Right. And I don't want people to not step out of their box if they don't have a question in mind. Like, we can still
Yes.
do that, right? I think we can get paralyzed by saying I don't know what to ask, or I don't know. I'm not naturally curious. Like, there's all these stories that we hold that can keep us in that box. And it's like, yeah, just go out with someone different, right? Like we don't have to have this whole plan about what my intention is or anything like that. But
Like a
what
mime.
we
Yes.
what we do need to
Like,
do is start taking different
I
action
was thinking that sort of
and kind of break ourselves out of that box,
interestingly, it's
or
kind of like
even
the
start to
more
feel the sides of
information
it.
you have, the more questions you probably have. I
Mom
have
and
found
Sean's
that
for
in
you.
my life. The more that I know, the more questions I actually have. So I think even if you're just doing something new or stepping outside your comfort zone or just, I don't know, anything that's a new piece of information that might spark a new question or spark something else, you know? So I think, like you said, this people often do have these ideas of themselves of, oh, I'm not curious or I don't have questions or they do the panic, the sort of panic shutdown. I don't know what to ask. And if you think, well, maybe it's not a question for now, maybe it's just getting more information about what's out there in the world, about which feeds what you know about yourself, right? And can lead to it's all kind of that sequence that happens. Mhm.
Well, and for people who feel as though they're not naturally curious, simple entry point is if there's something that you're doing the same way every day, if you always brush your teeth with your left hand, just ask yourself why. That's a simple question. Like, why do I always do it with my right hand? And what if I do it with my left hand today? Well, that I've sucked. I put the toothbrush up my nose. I don't want to do that again. So it's like great. Now you have data. But that just starts the engine running of asking the questions. Some of us it's much more natural. It's much more second nature just to ask questions. And that's okay, right? Not everybody has to be a questioner. Not everybody has to be driven by inquiry. And even the smallest questions allow us to understand where we have been so conditioned to just behave and show up. And that is the pathway to autonomy. We can't be autonomous if we don't see those edges.
Yeah. I like that. It's like practice, right? When we start to make different choices about everyday things that have put us on autopilot, we're actually just
Absolutely.
practicing making choices. And so then we get to bigger and bigger choices. We get to more and more intentionality about how we are living our lives in all kinds of ways.
So beautifully said. So, what are some of the big takeaways that we want to make sure that people are taking with them from today's conversation? You're like, all of them, every idea.
It was a really great conversation. We
It
said a
was.
lot today. Um, I'm gonna jump in because I really like I love the idea of like, right, we think there's only two choices or we think we know, right, what's going on. And when we can pause and take a step back and just ask like, and what else? Right? Or it doesn't, again, it doesn't have to be big, but it starts to bring shape to the box that I'm in. And if we want to decide we're in a great box, then we're in a great box. But it's a decision that we're making with our eyes wide open. And so I love the conversation today around like how do we become more intentional to and just through the act of intentionality, just through the act of changing hands with a toothbrush, we're actually practicing autonomy, right? We're actually bringing more of that into our lives.
So, I think one of the things that really stands out for me from this conversation is how big the world really still is. We keep being told the world is getting smaller because we're becoming more and more connected. And yet, what's happening is our world is becoming smaller because we're more and more connected and we're becoming more and more curated. And the systems that are curating us are so big that that curation is actually we were talking about oppression, but that curation is becoming a form of oppression because it's keeping us from being able to make our own choices to be autonomous. And so allowing ourselves to step outside of those systems, those apps, those places, those communities, and find new places to be curious about, right? W- What's possible when you do that is we start to open up channels between each other that haven't existed before. So that's kind of, it's huge. It's really big. And it's great that we have ways to connect in, but let's make it big again, and let's stop trying to make it so small.
I would just invite people to also reflect on what freedom and autonomy mean to them and just sort of their own definitions, and thinking if their lives are in alignment with those definitions. And if so, in what ways? And if not, in what ways? And maybe what choices they could make to kind of move them in that direction that would feel more in alignment with what freedom and autonomy would mean to them.
Yeah. Beautiful. And brought us right back to the beginning of our conversation. I love that. Rebecca, where in the world can people find you, and what do you have going on?
As we discussed before, I am always traveling and moving around the world, and I will be in London for the next few months. Very excited about that. And then TBD for the rest of the year. With my business, I do ethical leadership advising and coaching, and I'm exploring new ways to offer that this year. So workshops and trainings, in addition to my one-on-one and small group coaching. And so I know that these are crazy times we live in, and people do care about the issues affecting their community and the world. And so I'm basically trying to support those people in their work, in leading with integrity and all of that. And so I'm just trying to see, again, how I can make that kind of accessible to more people.
So wonderful. And we will include all of your links in the show notes so people will be able to find you and connect with you out in the world. Thank you for this really beautiful conversation.
Yeah. Great conversation. Thanks, listener, for tuning in. Take care.
And that's all for this week's episode of the Empowered and Embodied Show. We hope today's episode has sparked something within you. Remember, we're all on this journey together. If something did resonate with you today, why not share it with a friend who might need to hear it too? You can find us everywhere you listen to podcasts. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. And if you're feeling generous, leave a review. Your feedback not only helps others find the show, but also helps us understand what's most valuable to you. Until next time, be kind to yourself, stay curious, and remember, we're walking right alongside you. Thanks for being part of our community.